यात ते बरेच आहे ना काम करतो
आणि ते रेकॉर्डिंग चालू झालं बघा.
त्यांचा त्याला ऑप्शन असतो आपल्याला नाही तो. कोणचा शोध लागला
मला मी त्याच्यावर क्लिक केला ना जास्त. मला वाटलं तुम्हाला करायचं आहे तर करा. मी क्लिक केला म्हणून झालं तर.
डोंगरे सर डोंगरे सर
माझा आवाज येतोय?
येतोय सर.
क्लिअर येतोय ना?
हो येतोय, क्लिअर येतोय सर.
ओके.
Today.
डोंगरे साहेब, अनुभुले साहेब आलेले आहेत. तुमचा आवाज म्यूट आहे सर.
Is I audible?
डोंगरे साहेब आवाज म्यूट आहे.
Yes, boss. कागदपत्र
डोंगरे साहेब, तुमचा आवाज म्यूट होता. हरकत नाही. नमस्कार, मी ॲडव्होकेट जगदीश वारगडे, शहापूर न्यायालय वकील संघटना आयोजित कायदेविषयक व्याख्यानमाला पर्व दुसरे व्याख्यान 14वे यामध्ये आपल्या सर्वांचे स्वागत करतो. आज आपल्यासाठी 14वे व्याख्यान जे देणार आहेत ते ॲडव्होकेट डॉक्टर राजेंद्र अनुभुले सर, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अँड क्रिमिनल जस्टिस या विषयावर करणार आहेत. डॉक्टर राजेंद्र अनुभुले सर यांचा परिचय मी करून देतो. डॉक्टर राजेंद्र अनुभुले सर यांनी PhD इन लॉ 2013 साठी केलेली आहे. त्यानंतर त्यांनी युनिव्हर्सिटी इथून LLM केलेला आहे आणि LLMच्या परीक्षेमध्ये ते प्रथम क्रमांकावरती आलेले होते. त्यांनी LLB आणि LLS पुण्याच्या ILS लॉ कॉलेज मधून LLB केलेली आहे आणि त्यांना बेस्ट स्टुडंट अवॉर्ड त्या ठिकाणी प्राप्त झालेला होता. त्यांनी सोशल पॉलिटिकल सायन्स या विषयामध्ये MA केले आणि युनिव्हर्सिटी डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ पॉलिटिकल सायन्स या त्यांनी MA केलेला आहे. ऍडव्होकेट अनबुले सर हे ऍडव्होकेट ऑन रेकॉर्ड सुप्रीम कोर्ट असून त्यांनी अनेक विषयांवरती वेगवेगळ्या विषयांवरती आपल्या कायदेशीर व्याख्यानं दिलेली आहेत. कल्याण येथे मागील 2 महिन्यापूर्वी झालेल्या क्लेपच्या कार्यक्रमात आम्हाला त्यांना ऐकण्याचा एक संधी मिळाली आणि त्यांच्या एकूण जे विषयाच्या समजवण्याची जी पद्धत आहे त्यांनी सगळेच आमच्या कल्याण डिव्हिजन मधले जे काही वकील होते ते त्या ठिकाणी प्रभावित झाले आणि त्यांनी अनबुले सरांचे भविष्यामध्ये आपण आपल्याकडे लेक्चर आयोजित करूया यासाठी त्यांनी मला विनंती केली होती शहापूरच्या वकिलांनी. त्याप्रमाणे मी अनबुले सरांना विनंती केली. अनबुले सरांनी आपण कल्याण आणि इतर ठिकाणी डोमेस्टिक व्हायलन्स वरती आपले जे काही विषय आहेत त्या विषयावरती त्यांचे वेगवेगळे लेक्चर आपण ऐकलेले आहेत. आज ते आपल्याला कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अँड क्रिमिनल जस्टिस, बॉन्ड रिलेशनशिप अँड अनालिसिस या विषयावरती आपल्या सर्वांना मार्गदर्शन करणार आहे. तर हे मार्गदर्शन ऐकण्यासाठी जमलेल्या या सर्व पार्टिसिपंट्सना माझी विनंती आहे की लेक्चरच्या दरम्यान आपण कोणीही आपले ऑडिओ व्हिडिओ अनम्यूट करू नये. तसेच जर कनेक्टिव्हिटी मध्ये कुठल्याही पद्धतीचा प्रॉब्लेम येत असेल तर आपले लेक्चर फेसबुकवर लाईव्ह आहे त्यामुळे त्या ठिकाणी आपण कनेक्ट होऊ शकता. तसेच लेक्चर संपल्यानंतर युट्यूबच्या आपलं शहापूर कोर्ट बार असोसिएशन या नावे असलेल्या युट्यूब चॅनलवरही सदरचं जे लेक्चर आहे ते तात्काळ प्रस्तुत केलं जातं. त्यामुळे आपल्याकडून जर कुठल्या लेक्चरचा भाग राहून गेला असेल पाहण्याचा ऐकण्याचा तर आपण त्या ठिकाणी जाऊन आपण पाहू शकता. तर मी आज डॉक्टर अनबुले सरांना विनंती करतो की त्यांनी आपलं जे मार्गदर्शन आहे आजच्या विषयावर ते मार्गदर्शन सुरू करावं. धन्यवाद.
Thank you very much. May I proceed?
Yes, sir. Yes.
At the very outset, I am very much thankful to Shahapur Bar Association for giving me an opportunity to refresh my memory in relation to the topic of law, constitution, and criminal justice. While discussing this topic, it is essential to discuss even judicial views about bond relationship of constitution and criminal law, for the reason that it is only because of judicial activism in the area of human rights, the law relating to criminal justice vis-a-vis constitution has been widened by Apex Court after 1978. Dear friends, even though constitution and criminal law are two different subjects, the fact is that implementation of criminal law is highly influenced, is highly regulated, is highly controlled, is highly supervised by constitutional law. It is because Constitution of India is a basic law of our legal system. It is a fundamental law. And all other laws which are there in India are subordinate to the Constitution. They are based on the Constitution. So, legality, validity, propriety, correctness of any law which is subordinate can be tested on the ground that whether it is consistent with Part 3rd of the Constitution or not. If any provision of law is there made by the Parliament which is not in accordance with Part 3rd of the Constitution, that provision, that law can be challenged as ultra virus to Part 3rd of the Constitution. You must be aware that Article 13 is there in the Constitution, And so far as post-constitutional laws are concerned, Article 32 Clause 2 is there, which is very much relevant, which says that state shall not make any law which takes away or abridges any right guaranteed by Part 3rd, and any law made by state which is in contravention to Part 3rd of the Constitution is unconstitutional, is void to the extent of that contravention. Now, very importantly, as criminal laws which are there in India, including Indian Penal Code, even Criminal Procedure Code or other special laws which are there, they are subordinate to the Constitution. And in the words of Kelson, constitutional law is a grand norm. It is a basic fundamental law, and all other laws like criminal laws are based on the Constitution. So it is expected that whenever any criminal law is implemented in India, that criminal law shall be in consonance with Part 3rd of the Constitution. And if it is not, then legality of that law can be challenged in Supreme Court or High Court. So before dealing with this topic, I am taking cursory glance of some important provisions which are there in Constitution because these provisions are directly related to criminal laws. And while understanding the impact of Constitution on criminal laws, these provisions will be very material one, relevant one. Coming to first provision which is there in the Constitution, that is Article 12, wherein definition of state is given. Now, fundamental rights are enforceable against violative state action. So, if a case is to be filed against the state, then a person who is aggrieved, a person who is a petitioner shall know that whether the respondent comes within the purview of state or not. So Article 12 to 35 discusses about fundamental rights. Article 14 to 18 deals with right to equality. 19 to 22 deals with right to freedom. 23 and 24 deals with freedom against exploitation. 25 to 28 deals with right to religion. Article 29 and 30 deals with cultural and educational rights. And Article 32 deals with right to constitutional remedy. Even Article 26 is also there, but it is not part of fundamental right. Now, very importantly, in Article 12, which comes in Part 3rd of the Constitution itself, wherein the title is Fundamental Rights, definition of state has been given. And Article 12 says, unless the context otherwise requires, state includes government and parliament of India, government and legislature of each state, all local and other authorities within the territory of India and under the control of government of India. Now, this Article 12, which defines state, has left some words undefined. There is no explanation given to Article 12 or there is no schedule attached to the Constitution wherein these words are defined or they are explained. One of the words is there in Article 12, that is other authorities. Now Article 12, if explained, it means that government and parliament of India means Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha and Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers along with President of India. If we come to state, it is Legislative Assembly of the state known as Vidhan Sabha, Legislative Council of the state known as Vidhan Parishad, Chief Minister along with his Council of Minister and Governor. Local authorities are local self-government like Gram Panchayat, Panchayat Samiti, Jilla Parishad, even municipal corporation, municipalities are there. But the word other authorities is not defined. importantly, in 1954, when University of Madras versus Santhabai was decided by Madras High Court held that University of Madras cannot be treated as a state because it is not discharging function of a like nature, like executive or even legislature. So doctrine of ius den generis was applied by High Court in Santhabai case. This University of Madras case was rejected by Supreme Court of India in 1962 when Ujjam Bhai was decided. And in Ujjam Bhai case, Supreme Court of India observed that with a view to enforce fundamental rights against violative state action, there is a need to enlarge the definition of state which is there in Article 12. Finally, in 1978, when R.D. Shetty versus International Airport Authority was decided by Supreme Court of India evolved new concept, new doctrine, that is concept of agency of the state or instrumentality of the state, wherein definition of state within the meaning of the term other authority was expanded by Apex Court. And on the basis of R.D. Shetty case in 1981, Ajay Hasia versus Khalid Mujib was decided by Apex Court, wherein R.D. Shetty was revisited. Again in 2002, when Pradeep Kumar Bishwas was decided, scope of Article 12 was widened, wherein 1975 judgment of Apex Court, that is Sabhajit Tiwari, was overruled after such a long gap. So Article 12 discusses about definition of state. Coming to Article 14, it says that state shall not deny to any person equality before law and equal protection of law within the territory of India. All are equal and law shall be applied equally. Now, very importantly, why I am discussing Article 14, the reason is that there is one constitutional scheme wherein all these articles are interconnected with each other. So after Article 14, Article 19 is there, wherein certain fundamental freedoms are guaranteed to the citizens of India, like freedom of speech and expression, freedom of assembly, freedom to form association, freedom to move from one place to another, freedom to carry on any occupation, trade and business. Such kind of fundamental rights are guaranteed. And whenever any criminal law is applied illegally or wrongly, in that particular case, even Article 19 is also violated. So if XYZ is arrested by police without any kind of justification, then certainly Article 19 is also violated. Article 14 is also violated because 14 speaks about equality, wherein discrimination is there. Article 19 speaks about right to freedom, move from one place to another, and his movement is restrained by the police. So there is close nexus, connection, relationship, association between all these articles, and they form part of one single scheme. There is a constitutional scheme in relation to these particular articles, and they are interconnected. Coming to next article, that is Article 20. Article 20 has given three important rights to every citizen of India. First is protection against ex post facto law, Article 20, Clause 1, wherein when an act is committed by anybody today, and very importantly, if that particular act is not an offense, then subsequently in future, legislature cannot make law and that act cannot be made an offense. Protection against ex post facto law. Second is protection against double jeopardy. In case of protection against double jeopardy, a person cannot be prosecuted and punished for same offense more than once. Is a law. And third is protection against self-incrimination, which is also known as right to silence. Wherein also it is provided by Article 20, Clause 3 that no person who is accused of any offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. So he cannot be forced to speak against himself. That's why provisions are there even in Indian Evidence Act, wherein a forced confession is violative to the provisions which are there in Indian Evidence Act itself, and at the same time, it is violative to even constitutional provisions, the scheme which is there in Article 20, Clause 3. Now, very importantly, Article 21 is there, which is closely related to today's discussion. And Article 21 says that no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law. If a person is to be deprived of his life and personal liberty, then there shall be a procedure, and that procedure shall be prescribed by law. Article 22 is there, which also deals with provisions relating to arrest and detention. And this article has given, Article 22 has given 4 important constitutional rights to every citizen of India. First is, when a person is arrested, the grounds of arrest shall be communicated to him. Grounds shall be informed to him by police. Secondly, he must be given opportunity to consult a lawyer of his own choice. Thirdly, he shall be brought before the court within 24 hours of his arrest. And fourthly, if he is to be detained beyond that period, then he can be detained only by the order of the magistrate. These 4 rights are guaranteed by Article 22, Clause 1 and 2 of the Constitution. Article 22, Clause 3 says that nothing will be applicable to any person who is detained under the preventive detention law or to any person who is an alien enemy. Article 22, Clause 4 is very important. And Clause 4 says that when a person is detained, then in that case, he can be detained to the extent of 3 months, wherein recommendation is given by advisory board. So the advisory board recommendation is required if a person is to be detained for the period of 3 months. Article 22, Clause 5 says a person who is detained is having 2 rights. First is, grounds of detention must be communicated to him, and second is, he must be given opportunity to make representation against that detention. Clause 6 says of Article 22 that the grounds of detention may be withheld by the state in public interest. And Article 22, Clause 7 is very important, which says that if detention is required beyond 3 months, then Parliament can make law and Parliament can provide that detention may be extended beyond 3 months. Last article is there, that is Article 32, wherein a person whose fundamental rights are violated, he can approach to Supreme Court under Article 32, Clause 1 by appropriate proceeding for the enforcement of the fundamental rights guaranteed by Part 3rd. And according to Article 32, Clause 2, Apex Court can issue writs, orders and directions in the nature of habeas corpus, mandamus, certiorari, prohibition and quoranto for the enforcement of rights guaranteed by Part 3rd. So this is a constitutional scheme in relation to fundamental rights. Very importantly, till 1978, criminal law has influenced constitutional law. But after 1978, the fact is that it is the constitutional law which has highly influenced the criminal law. Not only that, constitutional law has even controlled the regulation of criminal laws in India. That's why, while discussing today's topic, that is Constitution and Criminal Justice, Bond Relationship and Judicial Views, it is essential to discuss jurisprudential aspect of interpretation of Constitution by Apex Court in India from 1950 to 1978 and post 1978. Friends, you must have heard about analytical legal positivism theory in jurisprudence, wherein Austin says that law is a command of sovereign addressed to the subjects, which is secured by physical force of the state. In analytical legal positivism, judge-made law is denied. And according to analytical legal positivism, law is made by the sovereign state. From 1950 to 1978, Supreme Court of India was highly influenced by analytical legal positivism of Austin, because of which criminal law control even part 3rd of the Constitution. But after 1978, Apex Court rejected analytical legal positivism of Austin and it accepted American legal realism. And American legal realism theory says that judges are lawmakers. Judges put life in the dead word of the statute. And very importantly, the place where the judges are sitting is not a courtroom, but it is a laboratory where the law is every day retested and refined by them. So, after 1978, when Maneka Gandhi was decided, human right jurisprudence was evolved in India, and because of that, constitutional jurisprudence was interpreted in the light of criminal jurisprudence, wherein criminal justice system in India was highly regulated by Apex Court while interpreting part 3rd of the Constitution. I may say that Supreme Court of India literally control criminal laws while interpreting part 3rd of the Constitution, and that was only happened because of the judgment given by Apex Court in Maneka Gandhi case. Now coming to 1950, who is superior? Whether criminal laws are superior to part 3rd or whether part 3rd is superior to criminal law, that debate was started in 1950 itself when Constitution was commenced. And the first important judgment which was decided by Apex Court in 1950 was Gopalan versus State of Madras. In Gopalan case, Preventive Detention Act Section 14 was challenged as unconstitutional. And in Supreme Court, it was argued by petitioner that Article 14, Article 19, Article 21 are closely related to each other. They form part of one single scheme. When Article 21 is violated, Article 14 and Article even 19 is also violated. Second argument was there, that is, if any procedure is to be adopted by the state, then that procedure shall be just, fair and reasonable. It should not be arbitrary. And third argument was there, that is, in every case, state shall follow principles of natural justice. As I told earlier, that initially Apex Court was highly influenced by analytical legal positivism, and even there are some judgment of Apex Court wherein it was held that we are servant of the legislature. Whatever Parliament has enacted, we are having duty to interpret that. In Gopalan case, Supreme Court of India rejected the contention of petitioner and held that Article 21 does not discusses about due procedure. If law is there and a procedure is let down, in that case, the procedure may encroach on right and liberties of a person, wherein challenge to Article 14 cannot be made. But Justice Fazal Ali gave dissenting judgment in Gopalan case by saying that Article 14, 19, 21 are related to each other. They form part of one single scheme. Principles of natural justice are to be followed. And thirdly, even very importantly, due procedure is to be there under Article 21. But majority of the judgment of Gopalan rejected due procedure and also relationship between Article 14, 19 and 21. This is known as doctrine of exclusivity of fundamental rights. That Article 19, Article 21 and Article 14 are not related to each other. they don't form part of one single scheme, doctrine of exclusivity of fundamental rights. After Gopalan case in 1970, Supreme Court of India decided one landmark case, that is R.C. Cooper versus Union of India. Why I am referring this case of R.C. Cooper? The reason is that the first blow was given by R.C. Cooper to Gopalan case of 1950 in 1970, after 20 years. And in R.C. Cooper case, Apex Court held that Article 32 of the Constitution can be read in connection with Article 19 of the Constitution in dealing with right to property. Now, very importantly, what R.C. Cooper tried to interpret is this, that Article 19 and Article 31 are related to each other. It means that there is interconnection between them. Now, this interconnection was denied by Apex Court in Gopalan case, wherein Supreme Court held that 14, 19 and 21 are not related to each other. But in R.C. Cooper case, Supreme Court of India held that Article 31 is to be read in connection with Article 19 of the Constitution, and there is interconnection between them. It means that R.C. Cooper is a first blow to Gopalan case so far as interpretation of Part 3 is concerned. And again in 1973, when Shambhunath Sarkar versus State of West Bengal was decided by Apex Court in 1973, that time, while interpreting Article 22 Clause 4 with Article 22 Clause 7, Apex Court held that if time is to be extended beyond 3 months by Parliament by making a law, then reasonableness of that particular law can be tested by the court. So impliedly and expressly, Shambhunath Sarkar judgment of 1973 and R.C. Cooper of 1970 was a blow to Gopalan case. But very importantly, in 1978, when Menaka Gandhi was decided by Supreme Court of India, Supreme Court overruled Gopalan case. And what was held by Justice Fazal Ali in Gopalan case as a dissenting judgment was a law in Menaka Gandhi case. And in Menaka Gandhi case, Supreme Court of India held that Article 19, 14 and 21 are closely related to each other. There is a constitutional scheme. They are interconnected. When 21 is violated, 14 and even 19 is also violated. This is known as doctrine of inclusivity of fundamental rights, because these articles are inclusive in nature, was the judgment given by Apex Court in Menaka Gandhi. And at the same time, Supreme Court of India held that any procedure which is to be adopted by the state shall be just, fair and reasonable. If it is arbitrary, it is violative to Article 21 and even 14 of the Constitution. So we may say that Article 21 is only saying that no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law. The word due is not there in Article 21, but in Menaka Gandhi case, Apex Court held that the procedure shall be just, fair and reasonable, and it shall be due. So we may say that Article 21 was impliedly amended by Apex Court in Menaka Gandhi case, and because of this Menaka Gandhi case, there was a profound impact on criminal justice post 1978 when Constitution was interpreted by Apex Court in the light of criminal laws. Now coming to second important aspect so far as today's discussion is concerned, that what kind of impact Constitution has made on criminal law and how there is bond relationship between these two laws. As I told earlier, that constitutional law and criminal law are different subjects. But whenever there is a question of implementation, criminal laws are highly influenced, highly regulated and controlled, supervised by constitutional law. As you know that FIR can be lodged under section 154 of the CRPC in cognizable cases. After registration of FIR, criminal law is set in motion. Police can arrest the accused. He can be brought before the court. Police custody can be given if investigation is in progress. And if the magistrate is satisfied, then he can grant magistrate custody. That is known as MCR. After MCR, that accused person can apply for bail. Police can conduct the investigation. Charge sheet can be filed. If it is a case triable by session court, it can be committed to session court. If accused is of the opinion that there is no evidence against him in that charge sheet, then he can file application for discharge. If he is not discharged, charge can be framed against him, and after framing of the charge, prosecution can open the case. Trial can be conducted. Trial will conclude. If offense is proved beyond reasonable doubt, accused can be convicted, he can be punished, he can be sent to jail for facing the music. He has to undergo the punishment in jail. Meanwhile, he can file appeal to High Court against the order of High Court to Supreme Court. If Supreme Court rejected the appeal, he can file review petition. After review petition, he can go for even curative petition. And after curative petition, last resort is there, that is mercy petition before the President of India. Right from filing of the FIR till the disposal of mercy petition by Apex Court, by President of India, Apex Court has regulated, supervised, control the criminal justice system. So far as today's discussion is concerned, right from the arrest of a person till the disposal of mercy petition by President of India, how Apex Court has interpreted part 3rd in the context of criminal justice system is very important to discuss. So going to first aspect now, arrest of a person. Now person can be lawfully arrested by police. That arrest is justified by CRPC as well as Article 21 and 22 of the Constitution. Now sometime it may happen that police may arrest a person and they may not show the time of that arrest. That person may be detained for unreasonable period of time without any kind of record. So very importantly, as I said earlier, that Apex Court has evolved human rights jurisprudence post Menaka case, wherein so far as illegal arrest and detentions are concerned, Supreme Court has decided one landmark judgment in 1997, that is D.K. Basu versus State of West Bengal. In D.K. Basu case, when Supreme Court of India came to know that several illegalities are committed by police while arresting a person, due process of law is not followed, law is altogether ignored by the police, Supreme Court clarified in D.K. Basu case that now time has come to educate the police. Not only that, Apex Court held that whatever guidelines we are giving in D.K. Basu shall be affixed on the notice board of the police station, every police station, and police should read that particular guidelines so that they will respect human rights of common people. Right from arrest of a person till bringing that person before the magistrate, nearest magistrate, some guidelines were given by Apex Court in D.K. Basu case, like police should wear a visible name tag. A person who is accused, who is arrested, he should come to know that who is that particular officer, whether he is a constable or whether he is an inspector. He should be aware of that. That's why in D.K. Basu, Apex Court said that police should wear a name tag which shall be accurate and visible. Apex Court also said that memorandum of arrest shall be prepared by the police. the relatives or friend of that particular person should be informed by police. Immediate medical examination of that accused person shall be conducted. He should be given opportunity to discuss or we may say communicate a lawyer of his own choice. And not only that, even a time and place of arrest shall be notified by the police. For me, what is important in relation to DK Basu is that in DK Basu case, Apex Court clarified that if police commit any kind of illegality while dealing with the cases of arrest and detention, then state is vicariously liable for the act of the police. And for that vicarious liability, even a person who is illegally arrested is entitled to claim compensation. So, protection against arrest or protection against illegal arrest by police is protected by DK Basu case. Now, a person is arrested by police and he is brought before the magistrate. Some procedural provisions are there in CRPC in relation to arrest, how it should be dealt with, and how the procedure is to be followed by the police, how he is to be brought before the court, and how he can be even sent to magistrate custody. Now the issue is, for how much time the period of police custody is to be extended. And this law has been settled by Apex Court in CBI versus Anupam Kulkarni case of 1992. In Anupam Kulkarni case of 1992, Apex Court clarified that in any case, police custody shall not extend beyond 15 days. So, by this particular judgment, Apex Court tried to clarify the law relating to custodial interrogation of accused person. Now, sometime when an accused is arrested by police, he is handcuffed. Now, the issue is whether handcuffing is permissible in law. Now, Apex Court has tried to discourage the practice of handcuffing, and it has been reiterated by Apex Court in several cases that handcuffing is to be there only in extreme cases. Finally, in 1980, Apex Court clarified the law relating to handcuffing in Prem Shankar versus Delhi administration case. And in Prem Shankar case of 1980, Apex Court clarified that handcuffing can be there only in extreme cases if it is required. Otherwise, handcuffing is violative to Article 21 of the Constitution. And Apex Court further clarified, only when there is an imminent danger of escape, if there is a possibility that accused will escape, in that case only handcuffing can be resorted. Now, presume for some time when a person who is accused is of 80 years of age, who is not in a position to even walk also, in such case there is no imminent danger that he will escape from that police custody, and in such cases handcuffing is impermissible, was decided by Apex Court in Prem Shankar case of 1980. So see, initially in 1951, Gopalan was decided by Apex Court. Apex Court held that even though the procedure is not fair or just, then also it is justified. But post Menaka case in 1980, Prem Shankar is saying that handcuffing shall be resorted only when there is imminent danger of escape. Now, after 1978, as I have told earlier, that it is the criminal law which was dominated by constitutional law, and it was highly controlled and regulated, even supervised by Part 3 of the Constitution, in the light of some judgments which were given by Apex Court. Another important aspect is there in relation to third degree. The question is whether third degree is permissible, whether police can commit atrocities on accused person when he is in police custody. After 1 year of Prem Shankar case, in 1981, Supreme Court of India decided another landmark case, that is Kishore Singh versus State of Rajasthan. And in Kishore Singh case, Supreme Court of India held that any torture committed by police, any third degree method adopted by police is against the spirit of Article 21 of the Constitution, and third degree method is totally barbarous. It is uncivilized and it cannot be accepted so far as Article 21 is concerned and rights of that particular accused is concerned. So very importantly, handcuffing and third degree method has been discouraged by apex court, and if such kind of procedure is adopted by police, then accused person is having every right to approach the Supreme Court under Article 32 clause 1 of the Constitution, and in appropriate cases he can even claim compensation against the state. Now very importantly, another important aspect is there. Presume for some time that the accused is in police custody and police are forcing that accused person to speak against himself. As we discussed earlier, that Article 20 clause 3 is there, which deals with protection against self-incrimination. And Article 20 clause 3 says that a person who is accused of any offense cannot be compelled to speak against himself. So he cannot be forced to speak. And there is one general, we may say, principle of criminal law, that it is the duty of the prosecution to prove the guilt of the accused beyond reasonable doubt. So burden of proof is on the prosecution to prove guilt of accused beyond reasonable doubt. Accused has to remain silent. So prosecution has to bring on record sufficient evidence against the accused person, but they cannot force accused person to speak against himself. There is one landmark judgment given by Apex Court in 2010, that is Selvi versus State of Karnataka. And in Selvi case in 2010, Apex Court, in relation to doctrine of silence, that lie detector test, narco analysis test, and brain mapping test are unconstitutional and they are violative to Article 21 and 14 of the Constitution. So unless the accused consent for that, and unless the procedure clarified by Apex Court in Selvi case is complied, narco analysis, lie detector, and brain mapping test are unconstitutional, was held by Apex Court in Selvi case of 2010. So this is very important so far as right to silence in relation to accused is concerned, and Article 20 clause 3 has given a message that if at all prosecution want to prove, they have to prove that case beyond reasonable doubt. It is not the duty of the accused in that case. So very importantly, Selvi deals with right to silence of an accused. Now another important aspect is there, that is concept of free legal aid. In some criminal cases, accused person is not in a position to appoint a lawyer of his choice. That is because of several reasons. One of the important reason is his economic capacity. Now very importantly, if a criminal prosecution is launched against an accused, it is expected that there will be fair trial, speedy justice will be there, and accused person will be able to defend his case to the maximum. In that case, accused person will be able to justify his innocence, and for that purpose, service of lawyer is very much essential. Service of legal expert is very much essential. Article 39A is there in the Constitution, which is in part 4th. And part 4th of the Constitution is a chapter dealing with directive principles of state policy. Article 35 to 51 is part 4th, directive principles of state policy, and Article 39A is there in part 4. Friends, very importantly, Article 39A deals with free legal aid. State has to provide. But Article 39 cannot be enforced because of Article 37, as Article 37 says that directive principles are not enforceable in the court of law, even though they are fundamental in the governance of our country. So the issue is, if Article 39A cannot be enforced because of the bar, because of the rider which is there in Article 37, then what about free legal aid? Post Menaka case, Apex Court has decided one landmark case in 1978, that is Hoskote versus State of Maharashtra. And in Hoskote case, Apex Court held that right to free legal aid is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. And post Hoskote case, you all are aware that in 1987, the Legal Services Authority Act was enacted by Parliament of India. Now, very importantly, Article 39A was not enforceable in the court of law because of Article 37. Article 37 was saying that directive principles are not enforceable. But Apex Court in Hoskote case transferred, converted Article 39A in Article 21. So very importantly, Article 39A was not enforceable in the court of law because of Article 37. Now Article 39A is enforceable in the court of law under Article 32 clause 1 because of Article 21. Because Apex Court held that right to free legal aid is a fundamental right under Article 21. That's why we may say that Hoskote versus State of Maharashtra of 1978 is to be treated as a bridge builder between part 3rd and part 4th of the Constitution. And very importantly, after 1978, Apex Court started reading directive principles into fundamental right. This is a very important development so far as even the criminal justice system in India is concerned. So, right to free legal aid now can be provided at the expenses of the state to that accused person in criminal cases, and it is the duty of the state to appoint a lawyer wherein the accused person shall be effectively pleaded in a criminal court. Next even aspect is there. Now the trial has commenced. We know that when prosecution was launched and when MCR was granted to accused person is in jail waiting for the trial. He is under trial. When accused person is in jail, there are some cases which are happening in India wherein the punishment provided by law is 5 years and accused is waiting for his trial in jail for 5 years. For 5 years he was in jail waiting his trial. Taking cognizance of this, that there is inordinate delay in deciding the cases, and even criminal justice system has been interpreted and we may say executed, implemented wrongly. In 1979, post Menaka case, Supreme Court of India decided one landmark case, that is Husainara Khatun versus State of Bihar. And in Husainara Khatun case, Supreme Court of India held that speedy trial is fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. On the basis of Husainara Khatun case, now if there is delay in deciding the cases, accused person is entitled to file writ petition in High Court or Supreme Court, and he can even seek directions from the High Court for speedy disposal of the case or for time-bound case also. So Husainara Khatun is very important, wherein Apex Court held that speedy trial is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. After speedy trial, another important right has been decided by Apex Court, not only in favor of the accused, but in favor of victim or his relatives also. And that is right of fair trial. Right of fair trial also has been decided by Apex Court as a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution in Zahira Sheikh versus State of Gujarat, wherein Apex Court held that fair trial is not required only for accused. It is required for both. It is required even for victim and his legal representatives also, or his representatives also. So denial of fair trial is injustice to both the parties, wherein Article 21 is grossly violated, was the judgment given by Apex Court in Zahira Sheikh case. Now another important aspect is there. Presume for some time. Now the trial is conducted, accused is convicted, and he is sent to jail. Now he is not under trial. Now he is a convicted prisoner. After sending him to jail, now he is facing the music, he is facing the punishment. But in jail also, torture of that accused person is committed. Now Supreme Court of India has taken note of this, that post conviction, whether accused person is having certain human rights or fundamental rights or not. And when a person is tortured in jail after conviction, Apex Court took note of this in Sunil Batra case of 1978. And in Sunil Batra case, Supreme Court of India held that Apex Court can issue writ of habeas corpus even to prevent a torture of a prisoner in jail. Friends, law relating to habeas corpus has been interpreted very widely, very purposively and liberally by Apex Court in Sunil Batra case. It is because the traditional meaning of habeas corpus has been rejected by Apex Court in Sunil Batra case. What is the traditional meaning? When a person is illegally detained by police, then court can order release of that person if the detention is proved as illegal. But in Batra case, a person who is a convicted prisoner is not illegally detained by police. So impliedly and expressly, the Sunil Batra case is saying that writ of habeas corpus can be issued even though a person is legally detained. In case of legal detention also, writ of habeas corpus can be issued, is a judgment given by Apex Court in Sunil Batra case, very importantly. Now, before that also in Kanu Sanyal versus District Magistrate case, Apex Court held that without producing body of a person before the Apex Court or before the High Courts, court can direct release of that person if the detention is illegal. So the traditional meaning of habeas corpus, that person should be brought before the court or his detention shall be illegal, is not applicable so far as Indian jurisprudence of habeas corpus is concerned. And Apex Court has clarified that why we should adopt those methods, those tools which were outdated in United Kingdom 100 years back. So we can invent our new tools, our new remedies for the enforcement of fundamental rights guaranteed by Part 3rd. And Sunil Batra is a classic example of the fact that a person who is in jail, who is tortured, cannot be exempted from enjoying human rights which he is having. And court clarified that writ of habeas corpus can be issued to prevent the torture of that person even though his detention is legal one. So Sunil Batra case. Now presume for some time that the person who is accused was convicted by the court, he is in jail, he filed one appeal to High Court. In appeal also High Court confirmed the judgment given by Sessions Court, and finally accused person has filed appeal to Supreme Court. If appeal is not permitted, presume for some time that special leave petition under Article 136, his appeal or his special leave petition came to be dismissed by Supreme Court. Now issue is, after dismissal, Constitution has provided right to file review. Review was filed by accused, convicted prisoner, but the same came to be rejected. Review is a last procedure prescribed by constitutional law in India. Beyond review, there is no provision which is there so far as criminal jurisprudence is concerned or jurisdiction of Supreme Court is concerned. But in 2002, Supreme Court of India decided one landmark case, that is Rupa Hurra versus Ashok Hurra. And in this case, Apex Court clarified that even after dismissal of review petition, curative petition can be filed by that person. And by filing a curative petition, Supreme Court of India can examine the correctness of the decision given in review petition. But for that purpose, Supreme Court of India clarified that if a review petition is to be filed, then it should be certified by the senior counsel of Supreme Court that this is a fit case to file curative petition. And secondly, curative petition can be heard by 5 judges. It means that 2 judges division bench which was there in appeal or review petition, and 3 more judges who are senior judges of the Apex Court. 5 judges can decide curative petition filed by the person who has approached to the court. And after dismissal of curative petition, you all know that so far as criminal law is concerned, that accused person is entitled to file mercy petition before President of India. Article 161 of Constitution. Now, very importantly, Article 72, 76 also discusses about some rights of accused person in relation to mercy petition, and even governor is also having right so far as 161 is concerned. Now, very importantly, even though governor is also having right, but so far as central laws are concerned, and those cases wherein death penalty is given to that accused person, mercy petition is filed before President of India. Now, there are so many procedural lapses which were there in India, wherein mercy petition was kept pending for years. There was inordinate delay in filing the mercy petition. After filing of mercy petition also, mercy petition was not disposed by President of India in time, and because of which gross injustice was committed against accused person. In 2014, Apex Court has given one landmark judgment, that is Shatrughan Chauhan versus Union of India. And in Shatrughan Chauhan case, Apex Court of India held that inordinate delay in deciding mercy petition is violative to Article 21. And if there is delay of more than 2 years, then death penalty can be converted into life imprisonment. And Apex Court held in Shatrughan Chauhan case that even the order passed by President in mercy petition is also subjected to judicial review. So if mercy petition is decided arbitrarily, without passing any reason, without giving any reason, then even the decision of President of India in mercy petition can be challenged to Apex Court, and that was decided in Shatrughan Chauhan case. So very importantly, even decision of President on mercy petition is amenable to review was clarified by Apex Court in Shatrughan Chauhan case. See, right from the arrest of a person till the disposal of mercy petition, Supreme Court has tried to control the criminal justice system in India. Last aspect in relation to today's discussion is there, which is very much part of our discussion of criminal justice, is law relating to compensation. Now, presume for some time that a person is arrested by police, or he was in lockup, or he was in jail, and his human rights are violated, which are protected by Part 3 of the Constitution. Now the issue is, when fundamental right of any accused are violated by police or by executive machinery, then whether he is entitled to claim compensation against the state. whether the state is vicariously liable to pay compensation for the act committed by its official. In civil law, law is very much clear. Even the law of agency is there. Qui facit per allum facit per se. That he who act for another act for himself. Law of agency is there. That is unilateral manifestation of principle to be bound by the act of his agent. Even in law of tort also, there is a doctrine of respondent superior. Even there is a doctrine of vicarious liability, that employer can be held liable for the act of his agent. Now the issue is for the act of his even workman or employee. Now the issue is when public law and private law intersect with each other, then what will be the repercussions? Now presume for some time that a person is illegally detained by police and the reasons of arrest are not given to him. Can he claim compensation for that, as his article 21 and 21 is violated? In India, there is no law, codified law, statutory law dealing with right to claim compensation when fundamental rights of any accused persons are violated by police. Friends, in 1957-58, Law Commission of India had recommended Parliament of India, central government, to enact one law, that is liability of state in tort when fundamental rights are violated. But till today, till 2020, that law is not enacted by Parliament of India. But very importantly, judiciary has tried to evolve that law in India. In 1861, one landmark judgment was given by Supreme Court of Calcutta in Ocean Steam Navigation Company case. In Ocean Steam Navigation Company case, it was held by the court that state can be held liable to the subjects only when the act committed by government servant is not a sovereign act. So liability can be imposed for non-sovereign act. For sovereign act, state cannot be held liable. This Ocean Steam Navigation Company case was argued in Supreme Court of India in 1962 when state of Rajasthan versus Vidyavati was decided. See, there is a classification: sovereign function, non-sovereign function. For sovereign function, liability cannot be imposed. For non-sovereign function, it may be imposed. Driver of a collector was taking jeep from garage to the office of the collector. He drove that jeep rashly and negligently, and he committed one road accident wherein one pedestrian was died. Issue was whether driving a jeep from the garage to the office of the collector can be treated as a sovereign function of the state, and whether state can be exempted from liability. Apex Code held that distinction between sovereign and non-sovereign function is blurred. It is not clear. And when driver was driving that jeep from garage to the office of the collector, it cannot be said that it was a sovereign function. And in Vidyavati case, liability to pay compensation was imposed on the state. But friends, remember one thing: in Vidyavati case, right to compensation was not declared by Supreme Court as a fundamental right. Again, in 1965, Apex Court decided another case, that is Kasturilal's case. In Kasturilal versus State of UP, the issue was very important, wherein it was argued that when an act is committed by police because of which injury is caused to the citizen of India, to any subject which is subject matter of that particular case, that person shall be held entitled to claim compensation. In this case, some gold and silver was seized by police. It was in the custody of the police. Trial was conducted. And after trial, court came to know that there is no evidence against the accused. So he was discharged. He was acquitted by the court. After his acquittal, he filed application for recovery of that gold and silver which was in the custody of the police. But court came to know that the police constable in whose custody that gold was kept, he had fled away to Pakistan. It was argued in Supreme Court of India that the person is entitled, the gold belongs to him, he was the owner of that. Police constable has fled away to Pakistan. Along with that gold, it was misappropriated, and in that case, state shall be held liable. Very importantly, Supreme Court of India held on the basis of Steam Navigation Company case of 1861 that whatever has been happened in this particular case, that misappropriation of gold is to be treated as a sovereign activity of the state, and as so far as sovereign activity is concerned, state cannot be held liable to pay compensation. So if we analyze Kasturi Lal case with Vidyavati case of 1962, we can safely say that Supreme Court of India correctly laid down law in Vidyavati case, but that particular spirit was not followed in Kasturi Lal case. If compensation jurisprudence could have been evolved on the basis of Vidyavati case, law of compensation would have been different in India. But unfortunately, Vidyavati was not followed in Kasturi Lal, and in Kasturi Lal case, even though police misappropriated gold, that particular action of police was justified by apex court. But friends, as I told earlier, that post Menaka, apex court has evolved human right jurisprudence. Very importantly, the distinction between sovereign and non-sovereign function was rejected by Supreme Court of India after 1978, that is post Menaka case. And in 1981, when Kasturi Lal versus State of UP was decided by Supreme Court of India, in Kasturi Lal case, when Khatri versus State of Bihar was decided by Supreme Court of India, Kasturi Lal was decided in 1965. Post Menaka, Khatri versus State of Bihar was decided by apex court in 1981. And in Khatri versus State of Bihar, apex court held that now time has come that we should invent new tools, new remedies for the enforcement of fundamental rights guaranteed by Part 3rd. Now in Khatri case, what has happened? Police entered in jail, they blinded some prisoner and they committed atrocities on them. When matter reached to Supreme Court of India, apex court held that the conduct of police is violative to Article 21 of the Constitution, and Supreme Court of India directed Bihar government in Khatri case that all the prisoners who were blinded by police shall be admitted to hospital and the medical expenses of the same shall be paid by the state. Now very importantly, in Khatri case, actual compensation was not paid, but direction was given that they shall be admitted to hospital and state shall pay the expenses. After Khatri case of 1981, another case was decided by apex court in 1983, that is Rudul Shah versus State of Bihar. In Rudul Shah case, after acquittal, accused was in jail for 14 years and jail authorities forgot to discharge him, to release him. And after acquittal for 14 years, 1-4, he was in jail. Repetition came to be filed in Supreme Court of India, and in Rudul Shah case in 1983, Supreme Court of India directed Bihar government to release that person immediately. And very importantly, even court granted compensation of 35,000 rupees to him. Now, even though compensation was granted in Rudul Shah, right to compensation was not held as a fundamental right. That should be remembered. But third important judgment was given by apex court in 1993, that is Nilabati Behera versus State of Orissa. One boy was arrested by police, 22 years boy. He was kept in police custody. He was handcuffed. His mother came to meet him in the morning. She met him. She went back. In the evening, she again came to meet her son. and she came to know that her son is not there in the police custody. When she made inquiry, she came to know that her son has absconded from the police custody. And police told her, that lady, that your son has absconded from the police custody. We are also searching him. After some time, mother came to know that the dead body of her son is lying on the railway track, which was just near to the police station. And when autopsy was conducted, when post-mortem was conducted, it was revealed that the death of that child was due to beating by the police. It was a custodial torture. In Nilabati Behra case of 1993, Apex Court granted compensation of 1,50,000 to the relatives of the victim, mother of that particular child. Now, granting of compensation is not important. In Nilabati Behra case, Apex Court held that right to compensation is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. Friends, in 1956 to 58, certain directions were given by Law Commission to central government that liability of state in tort shall be a law in India, but that law was not enacted. It was suggested that for violation of fundamental right, a person shall be entitled to get compensation, but Parliament did not enact that law. In Nilabati Behra case of 1993, Apex Court held that right to compensation is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution. Very importantly, we may say that unwillingness of Parliament is substituted by willingness of judiciary. What Parliament did not do, as per the recommendation of Law Commission of India, judiciary did that in 1993 when right to compensation was declared as a fundamental right under Article 21. So in Khatri case, something was said, but compensation was not paid. In Rudul Shah case, compensation was paid, but something was not said. In Nilabati Behra case, compensation was paid and something was also said. What was said? That right to compensation is a fundamental right under Article 21. Based on Nilabati Behra case in again 2000, in Chairman Railway Board versus Chandrima Das, Apex Court granted compensation to a rape victim who was a Bangladeshi lady. She was a foreigner. So even in Chandrima Das case of 2000, Apex Court held that right to life and personal liberty can be claimed by even a foreigner also. Very importantly, and compensation was granted to that rape victim. Now, one important issue I want to discuss before concluding my discussion. As I told earlier, that Article 12 has defined the state, and I had discussed the definition of state. Now you all know who is a state. Fundamental rights are enforceable against violative state action. Article 14, 19, 21 are very material, and there is a constitutional scheme. They are closely related to each other. They are interconnected. There is close nexus, connection, relationship between them. That's why I told in Menaka Gandhi, Supreme Court of India evolved doctrine of inclusivity of fundamental rights, that they are inclusive, they are related to each other. They form part of one single scheme. The issue is whether fundamental rights are available against private person like you and me, whether private person is amenable to jurisdiction, whether compensation can be claimed against private person if fundamental right is violated. One judgment was given by Apex Court in 1996, that is Bodhisattva Gautam versus Subra Chakrabarti. In Bodhisattva Gautam, one professor was having relationship with his student. He took her to one temple, put false vermilion on her forehead and told her that you are my legally wedded wife. Subsequently, he denied her as a wife. He ignored her as a wife and complaint came to be filed against him, which was pending before the trial court. So FIR was filed under section 376 of the Indian Penal Code and matter was pending before the trial court. In Bodhisattva Gautam versus Subra Chakravarti, when matter reached to Supreme Court, when trial was pending before the trial court, Supreme Court of India held that rape is not a crime only against any particular individual, but rape is a crime against entire society. Justice Sagir Ahmad held in Bodhisattva that rape is a crime against entire society, and whenever rape is committed, it is violation of Article 21 of the Constitution so far as the victim is concerned. So Supreme Court of India connected rape victim to Article 21 of the Constitution, that is right to life and personal liberty in relation to right of that particular aggrieved person. Now very importantly, in Bodhisattva case, Supreme Court of India granted compensation of 1,000 rupees per month as an interim compensation till the rape charges are decided by trial court. Friends, what it means? It means that even a private person is amenable to the writ jurisdiction of Supreme Court. Even a private person is amenable to the discipline of fundamental rights. Even a private person is amenable under Article 21 of the Constitution. And for violation of fundamental rights, even you can claim compensation against private person also. So where is your definition of Article 12? Wherein Article 12 says that state includes government and parliament of India, government and legislature of each state, all local and other authorities within the territory of India and under the control of government of India. In Bodhisattva Gautam's case, even Article 21 was held enforceable against private person also, against a professor. So can it be said that the word other authorities which is there in Article 12 includes even a private person? So far as judicial interpretation of Part 3 is concerned, so far as human rights jurisprudence evolved by Supreme Court of India post Menaka is concerned, we can say that even a private person is also amenable to Part 3 of the Constitution, wherein he can be included in Article 12 so far as judicial interpretation is concerned. So time and again, Apex Court has tried to keep flag of humanity waving all the time in India, and Supreme Court of India has acted as a guardian, as a sentinel of justice, as a custodian of the Indian Constitution. So constitutional law and criminal laws are interconnected with each other. All the criminal laws are regulated by Apex Court in India. They are supervised by Supreme Court of India, and whenever criminal law is inconsistent with Part 3 of the Constitution, that particular criminal law has been struck down by Apex Court of India. You must be aware, in 2018, in Navtesh Singh Johar case, Supreme Court of India struck down Section 376 of the Indian Penal Code, 377 of the Indian Penal Code as unconstitutional. And last year, in Joseph Shine case, Section 497 of the Indian Penal Code dealing with adultery has also been held by Supreme Court of India as unconstitutional. That's why what I am saying is this: in India, constitutional law is the fundamental law of India. It is the basic law of India, and all other laws, including criminal laws, are based on the Constitution and they are subordinate. Legality, validity, propriety, correctness of any criminal law can be tested on the ground that whether it is consistent with the Constitution or not. And if it is inconsistent, then virus of that particular law can be challenged on the basis of Part 3 of the Constitution. And if court came to know that it is inconsistent with Part 3, then that particular law can be declared by Apex Court as void by applying doctrine of judicial review. So this connection is very important in India, wherein Constitution has control the criminal laws in India. In that case, we may say that there is a bond relationship between these two laws. Initially, criminal laws control the Constitution. In the wake of Gopalan case, Dr. Menaka Gandhi case, it is the Constitution which is controlling criminal laws. So this particular aspect shall be dealt in relation to part 3rd and all criminal laws which are there, including special laws, so far as criminal justice system in India is concerned. I am very much thankful to Shahpur Bar Association for giving me an opportunity to discuss some basic aspects in relation to today's discussion, today's topic, that is criminal justice system and constitution, bond relationship and judicial reviews. Thank you very much.
सर, अतिशय छान पद्धतीने मुद्देसूद मार्गदर्शन आपल्याकडून
आवाज येत नाहीये
सर. आवाज येतो आता?
हा येतोय, बोला.
काही प्रश्न आलेले आहेत सर, क्वेरीज आलेले आहेत, काही प्रश्न आलेले आहेत, ते विचारण्यापूर्वी सर्व पार्टिसिपेंट्सना मी विनंती करतो की त्यांना जे काही प्रश्न विचारायचे आहेत त्यांनी त्या चॅट बॉक्स मध्ये ते प्रश्न दाखल करावेत. प्लीज पुट युअर क्वेश्चन्स इन चॅट बॉक्स so far as we can ask our honorable guest their queries. पहिल्या प्रश्नाकडे जाण्यापूर्वी सर्व पार्टिसिपेंट्सना मी सांगू इच्छितो की आज आपण जे लेक्चर ऐकलं, साहेबांचं सरांचं लेक्चर जे ऐकलं, त्यावरून या क्रुशियल विषयासाठी साहेबांना आपण आमंत्रित का केलं याची कल्पना आली असेल. अतिशय मुद्देसूदपणे आणि वेगवेगळ्या ज्या केस लॉज आहेत त्या केस लॉजच्या मांडणीतून घटना आणि घटनेच्या अनुषंगाने जे फौजदारी न्याय आहे त्याची कशी प्रक्रिया आहे ती उलगडत साहेबांनी सरांनी उलगडून दाखवले आपल्याला आणि अतिशय छान आपल्याला मार्गदर्शन मिळालेलं आहे. पहिला प्रश्न सर मी आपल्याला विचारू इच्छितो. एकाच गुन्ह्यासाठी वेगवेगळ्या राज्यांमध्ये गुन्हा नोंद केला जातो. एखाद्या घटनेबद्दल वेगवेगळ्या राज्यात गुन्हा दाखल केला जातो, तर त्यासाठी आर्टिकल 32 नुसार सुप्रीम कोर्टामध्ये आपण याचिका दाखल करू शकतो का त्या स्क्वॉश करण्यासाठी? एका घटनेबद्दल
असं करता येईल. यू कॅन फाईल पिटिशन फॉर क्वॅशिंग or so far as Article 20 Clause 2 is concerned, it deals with protection against double jeopardy. So not only the punishment, even the prosecution is also not permissible. म्हणून एकच घटना जर घडली असेल तर एकापेक्षा जास्त प्रॉसिक्युशन त्याच्यासाठी होऊ शकत नाही. and there is a remedy. You can approach to Supreme Court and you can seek appropriate orders from the court.
Sir,
इव्हन मी एक क्लॅरिफिकेशन देईल तुम्हाला महाराष्ट्राच्या बाबतीमध्ये की महाराष्ट्रामध्ये सुद्धा 354 च्या बाबतीत अमेंडमेंट झालेली आहे, outraging the modesty of the woman, आणि आता जी पनिशमेंट आहे दॅट हॅज बीन इनक्रीज फ्रॉम 2 years to 5 years. आणि नाउ द ऑफेन्स इज नाउ ट्रायबल बाय सेशन कोर्ट. आता 2018च्या आधीच्या ज्या काही घटना आहेत त्या सुद्धा महाराष्ट्रामध्ये सेशन कोर्टाकडे बऱ्याचशा ट्रान्सफर झालेल्या आहेत. सुप्रीम कोर्टचं जजमेंट आहे 1981चं, टी बारी वर्सेस हेनरी हो. या जजमेंटमध्ये अपील कोर्टने क्लॅरिफाय केलेलं आहे की retrospective effect cannot be given to criminal legislation. It can be given only when that legislation is beneficial to the accused. म्हणून 2018च्या आधी, अमेंडमेंटच्या आधी घडणाऱ्या ज्या घटना आहेत त्या सुद्धा जर सेशन कोर्टाकडे ट्रान्सफर झालेल्या असतील, आणि ही अमेंडमेंट फक्त प्रोसिजरल आपल्याला पकडता येणार नाही कारण सबस्टॅन्टिव्ह पनिशमेंट सुद्धा इन्क्रीज झालेली आहे. दॅट्स वाय समवन शुड कम फॉरवर्ड अँड ॲज देर इज अ सबस्टॅन्टिव्ह इन्क्रीज इन द पनिशमेंट ऑल्सो, दॅट शुड बी चॅलेंज as violated to Article 20 Clause 2 of the Constitution. आणि 2018च्या आधीच्या ज्या घटना आहेत त्यासाठी 5 वर्षाची पनिशमेंट ऍप्लिकेबल होणार नाही. यासाठी कोर्टामध्ये दाद मागणं अतिशय गरजेचं आहे. नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन
सर. पुढचा प्रश्न विचारण्यापूर्वी बरेचसे पार्टिसिपेंट्सनी आज आपण जे केस लॉज रेफर केलेले आहेत त्या आणि काही जे नोट
मी त्याची लिस्ट देतो. मी तुम्हाला लिस्ट
सर व्हॉट्सअपला जर पीडीएफ वर पाठवलं तर मी शेअर करू शकतो. सर पुढचा प्रश्न आहे, इफ फंडामेंटल राइट्स ऑफ अ पर्सन आर व्हायोलेटेड ड्यू टू ऍक्ट्स ऑफ म्युनिसिपल कॉर्पोरेशन अंडर द प्रेशर ऑफ पॉलिटिशियन, अगेन्स्ट whom can the case file under what article?
See, I told earlier that municipal corporation comes within the purview of state under Article 12. So when fundamental rights are violated by municipal corporation, and if the violation is of such a nature that there is a necessity to claim compensation against municipal corporation, then in that case, that aggrieved person is entitled to file petition against corporation claiming compensation also. So it is justiciable. Nothing is wrong in that.
सर एकाच गुन्ह्यासाठी स्पेशल लॉ नुसारही एकाच घटनेबद्दल स्पेशल लॉ नुसारही एक गुन्हा नोंदवण्यात आलेला आहे आणि जनरल लॉ नुसारही एक गुन्हा नोंदवण्यात आलेला आहे. मग ते आपल्या घटनात्मक अधिकाराचं उल्लंघन नाही.
In that case, it is you can approach to the High Court, you can club the case, and you can decide. That particular matter can be decided by the trial court. ते matter club करून एकच matter court decide करू शकतो.
Yes.
दोन punishment होऊ शकत नाही वेगळ्या.
Sir, section 377 has been struck down. Thus, unnatural sex between husband and wife is no more a ground for divorce. A judgment held unnatural sex amount to cruelty.
Yes, definitely, it is a cruelty. It is covered by Section 3 of the Domestic Violence Act also.
Sir, what if the police has arrested the accused out of jurisdiction area?
See,
Permissible, and can we go and quash the FIR on that ground?
if a police has arrested any person beyond the jurisdiction area, then that arrest is permissible, provided that they have followed the procedure. Procedure जर follow झाली असेल तर it is permissible to do so.
Sir, is it not necessary for police to give something in writing to the accused at the time or before his arrest?
It is a constitutional mandate that it is the duty of the police to inform the accused the grounds of his arrest. And after informing the grounds of arrest, he should be given even an opportunity to consult a lawyer of his choice. And हे जर possible झालं तर definitely that aggrieved person who is accused is entitled to redress that particular grievance by filing a writ petition in the court.
सर ते जे आहे ते ओरली त्यांनी सांगणं गरजेचं आहे की रिटर्न मध्ये दिलं पाहिजे असं मला विचार.
See, it is on case-to-case basis approach. It differs, but if accused person is saying that orally it was not communicated to me, then it is the duty of the police to prove that he was communicated. Otherwise, they may communicate him in writing. Burden is on police in that particular case if the accused is saying that I was not communicated.
व्यावहारिक पुढचा प्रश्न मराठी. व्यावहारिक दृष्टीने पोलीस मार्गदर्शक तत्वे मान्य करीत नाही कारण त्याची नोंद कायद्यात रूपांतरित झालेली नसते. मग कसं काय करायचं त्यामध्ये?
You can approach to the Supreme Court for contempt of court. If you are having any particular experience, documentary one, then you can approach to the court. You can seek action against the police. And in that particular case, even High Court or Supreme Court may direct the commissioner of the police to take disciplinary action against them or departmental action against them.
So whether
you can avail that remedy.
So next question is whether compensation for search and seizure by CBI in 2010 in night hours can be made now, though there is no case filed by CBI against that person.
See, I am saying if any activity is committed by executive which is violative to law, you are entitled to claim compensation provided that your fundamental right is violated. Nothing is wrong in that. Now the law has been clarified by Apex Court.
Sir, that incident happened in 2010. Can we approach now?
See, it is to be decided by the Apex Court so far as condonation of delay is concerned. But more importantly, a Limitation Act is not applicable to writ petitions. So if the court is convinced to condone that particular delay.
Sir, next question is, when part of a building of society is falsely declared dilapidated with the help of other society members of the same society for the purpose of redevelopment and water and sewage services of that building are disconnected, what action can be taken? This
is not a question pertaining to today's discussion. I am very sorry.
Okay, sir. Sir, amendment carried out in section 354, is it retrospective? मला त्या प्रश्नाचं उत्तर आपण दिलेलं आहे.
Yeah, it is applied retrospectively, and even JMFCs are directed to transfer the cases to Sessions Court. That's why I am saying there is a judgment of Supreme Court that criminal law cannot be applied retrospectively. Now, this is not only a procedural, we may say, transfer of the cases. Very importantly, even the punishment is also increased. So there is substantive amendment also, so far as punishment is concerned. So in relation to those cases which were committed prior to 2018, those cases shall be tried by magistrate, and punishment shall be only 2 years only, not 5 years. So you can challenge that.
Anybody has any question? Please raise your hand. Yes, Mr. Kumar, Advocate Kumar. You can ask the question directly to our speaker.
Unmute. Hello, can you hear me, sir? Yeah, my question is, the secretary and honorary treasurer of a cooperative society was arrested on the charge of misappropriation of funds, and that case was ultimately tried out, and they were acquitted.
Hello, I'm not getting your voice. Hello.
Mr. Kumar, you are muted. Hello.
Now, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the secretary and treasurer were arrested on the charges of misappropriation of fund, and the trial was conducted, and in trial they were acquitted. In appeal also they were acquitted, and writ petition is pending. Now, during this trial, they were kept in a jail for more than 3 months. Can they file a suit or this compensation?
I am not getting your question, because they were acquitted by trial court. They are even acquitted in appeal. Then how came writ petition came to be filed? How writ petition is maintainable?
That's what still it's a pending. Anyhow, how
but,
it
but
is advocated,
writ petition is filed for what purpose?
That was filed by the private party only, the complainant.
I am not getting your question. Is too much vague.
Suppose take it granted writ petition is not filed, then in that case whether
then why when the appellate court has also acquitted them, then why they are in jail?
No, before filing of the charge, they were jailed, means they were behind the bar for more than 3 months.
No. See, before
filing of
acquittal, when a person is arrested till he is getting bail, he can be sent to jail only.
Yes.
So when pending trial or after that particular filing of the charge sheet, if they are enlarged on bail, and if subsequently in future if they are acquitted by the court, where is the question of claiming maintenance against the state?
No, for the period which were during this after filing of the FIR.
See, if the trial court has observed that the case is false one and he was falsely implicated in a particular case,
yes,
then he can go for malicious prosecution. But against the state, he cannot file the case for compensation.
Okay. Because this prosecution investigation officer has not found properly, he just because of certain.
In every cognizable case, it is the duty of the police to investigate. They have acted according to law. If the case is false, it is because of the complainant's, we may say, vague allegation which he had made in that particular matter. So how state will be liable to pay compensation?
No, but Iowa has not investigated it properly. That is the main reason.
Then you could have approached the High Court for investigation. Did you approach?
No.
Then
they were arrested and then they were bailed out after 3 months.
Okay. Is there any next question?
Hello. Hello.
हाँ सर.
हॅलो सर.
हा बोला.
हा, डी नोव्हो ट्रायल करण्याबद्दलची काय तरतूद आहे का? म्हणजे की पार्थर्ड मॅटर असेल, पहिला एव्हिडन्स जर एखाद्या कोर्टात झालेला असेल आणि परत त्यानंतर ती केस दुसऱ्या कोर्टात वर्ग झाली, म्हणजे की आता 353 ऑफेन्स हा पहिला जेएमएफसी ट्रायबल होता आणि 353 मध्ये अमेंडमेंट आली आयपीसीच्या, आणि परत मग सेशन कमिट झाल्या, तर सेशन्स कोर्ट हे परत डी नोव्हो करतात पार्थर्ड मॅटर. थोडक्यात म्हणजे परत चार्ज फ्रेम करणे, परत विटनेस बोलवणे. तर अशी काही तरतूद आहे का एक्सेप्ट 326 ऑफ द आयपीसी?
Yes, de novo trial साठी you have to approach High Court under section 482 of the CRPC. आणि सेक्शन 482 खाली आपण हायकोर्टाकडनं त्याच्या डायरेक्शन्स घेऊ शकतो आणि हायकोर्ट कॅन डायरेक्ट द लोअर कोर्ट टू गो डिनो. अशा हायकोर्टामध्ये याच्यावर अपेक्स कोर्टचे पण जजमेंट आहेत.
ऍडव्होकेट विरल भानुशाली, तुमचा प्रश्न विचारा.
Hello.
हा सर, बोला.
Sir, my question is little different. I just wanted to ask that does animals have the constitutional right? We can see that in IPC there is section 428 and 429. When the animal is killed, the police only file FIR under section 428 and 429 for mischief, and the punishment is also very less. So, what's your take on this? Because normally the police at the start they don't file FIR only. When the NGOs gets involved, they file FIR. So what's your take? Does they have constitutional rights or not?
No, Article 21 is certainly not applicable. There are other statutory laws under which court can take the cognizance. So far as Article 21(14) is concerned, Article 21 specifically says that no person
Sir, if a private case is registered in the court regarding any of a particular incident, and at the same time the FIR is also registered, and both the cases are with the different JMFC courts. So what procedure can be adopted?
see there can be two FIR in one case. It's
Yes,
a
sir.
law
There is
laid down
one FIR and one private case.
Yeah, for that purpose also you have to approach the High Court and you can go for quashing of the one. You can proceed with only one case so far as prosecution is concerned.
Yes, anybody has any question?
हॅलो. हा सर, आता आपण सांगितल्याप्रमाणे 2018 पूर्वीच्या केसेस सत्र न्यायालयात वर्ग झालेले आहेत आणि त्या संदर्भात सायटेशन मला तुम्ही सांगू शकाल का?
टी बारी वर्सेस हेनरी हो नावाचं आहे, 1981 आहे सुप्रीम कोर्टाचं, ज्याच्यामध्ये कोर्टाने सांगितलं की क्रिमिनल लॉला रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव्ह इफेक्ट देता येणार नाही. आणि आता दोन ऐवजी जर 5 वर्षाची पनिशमेंट दिली गेली असेल तर दॅट इज अ सबस्टॅन्टिव्ह अमेंडमेंट विच कॅनॉट बी अप्लाइड रेट्रोस्पेक्टिव्हली. सो तुम्ही चॅलेंज करा ते हायकोर्टामध्ये की असं करता येणार नाही.
धन्यवाद सर.
2018च्या नंतरच्या ज्या काही ऍक्ट घडलेले आहेत दॅट विल बी ट्रायड बिफोर द सेशन्स कोर्ट. 2018 if an offense is committed, that amendment is not only procedural, even punishment is also increased. So it is directly against the spirit of Article 20 clause 2 of the Constitution.
दिवाळे साहेब, मला मी दिवाळे वकिलांना विनंती करतो त्यांनी आभार प्रदर्शन.
सर्वांना नमस्कार. आजच्या विषयावर विविध केस लॉच्या माध्यमातून राज्य घटनेतील मार्गदर्शक तत्वे, नागरिकांचे मूलभूत अधिकार व फौजदारी न्याय यासारख्या किचकट विषयावर साहेबांनी अतिशय सोप्या शब्दात आपल्या सर्वांना मार्गदर्शन केलेलं आहे, विषय समजावून सांगितलेला आहे. खरं तर कठीण बाब सोप्या शब्दात उदाहरणासहित स्पष्ट करण्याची साहेबांची जी अतिशय परिणामकारक आहे. विषय समजून घेणं साहेब अतिशय सोपं होतं. या आधी देखील साहेबांनी आमच्या वकील संघटनेच्या विनंतीला मान देऊन त्या सर्वांशी संवाद साधलेला होता. यापुढे देखील साहेब नवीन विषयासहित आपल्या सर्वांशी संवाद साधतील अशी मी आशा व्यक्त करतो आणि डॉक्टर राजेंद्र अनबुले साहेबांचे शहापूर न्यायालय वकील संघटनेतर्फे आभार व्यक्त करतो. तसेच झूम ऍप व फेसबुक लाईव्हच्या माध्यमातून जोडल्या गेलेल्या आपणा सर्व मान्यवरांचे या निमित्ताने आभार व्यक्त करतो. या व्याख्यानमालेचे आमचे संयोजक शहापूर न्यायालय वकील संघटनेचे अध्यक्ष जगदीशजी वारगडे व त्यांचे सहकारी या सर्वांचे देखील आभार व्यक्त करून या संयोजकांच्या वतीने आजचं हे व्याख्यान या ठिकाणी संपलं असं जाहीर करतो.
थँक्यू व्हेरी मच.
सर्वांचं धन्यवाद. थँक्यू.